Before we look at creating a faux 3D parallax, let's take a look at why you might want to consider a faux 3D parallax over a true 3D parallax. So in this scene, it's pretty simple. I just have a few elements. They're scattered out in 3D space here. So on the Z axis, I'm running a two-camera setup where one camera controls the scale of all the objects. So as I distribute them in Z space, they stay the same relative scale. And then my second camera is just animated so that I can actually move around the scene. So if we look at my animated camera, I just have it simply zooming in on the farmer here, and we're getting that true 3D parallax going on. Now, this works out pretty well, except for the fact that when we look at the scale of the farmer, this is at 100% when we're zoomed out. And as we zoom in, even though this is at 100%, we are moving closer to the layer, so we're actually scaling it up. And in this particular situation, the farmer is getting a little bit soft because of that scaling. So how do we combat that? Typically, we just turn on the collapse transformation icon here button, and wait a second. Well, when we turn on collapse transformations, in order for this to be in 3D space, we have to go into this comp here and make sure all the layers are 3D as well. Now, this character is not rigged up, but if you've ever had a rigged character and you try and go in and turn all the layers into 3D layers, it tends to break things and make things really messy. I have been successful with it a few times, but it does slow down After Effects a bit in the process as well. So this type of situation is where I find the faux 3D parallax works out really nice, and it keeps all your layers 2D, but you still get that nice 3D parallax that we have going on here. Okay, let's jump into creating a faux 3D parallax scene. We're going to use this scene here of a forest fire. Let's go ahead and turn all of our layers off and take a look at what we have. So we have these layers in the background. We have some bushes. We have our trees. We have the smoke. We have the main fire. We have some additional fire elements here. We have this little tree in the midground. We have a flame going over that tree. And then we have additional tree elements. And then we have the ground. Now, in order for this faux 3D parallax effect to work, we need the anchor point to be in the center of the comp for all of our layers. And if we move down through the layers, we can see that that is true, except for the bushes. The bushes have the anchor point more centered on the individual objects. So in order to fix that, we're going to go ahead and attach all these to a null and make sure that null is in the center of the comp. So I'm going to select all the bushes. And we're going to use this script that I have in my K-bar. I'll have a link to the script in the description because it's really handy. But if we hold down Shift, it's going to go ahead and parent all those objects, all those layers to the null, and the null is going to be centered in the comp. I'm just going to call this bushes master. And so now we have it in the center of the comp, and they're all parented that. Perfect. Now, we are going to create a faux camera. Now, we don't have to do it this way, but I like to create a new layer. I'm going to create a null, and I'm going to name the null faux camera. And this is going to be the parent of our scene, and we have it here in the center of the comp. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this null for the bushes master, okay, so that we just see the faux camera null. Now, let's go ahead and parent all these layers to this faux camera using faux parent. So I'm going to select everything except for the bushes because the bushes are attached to this null. And for the parent type, I'm going to put it on XY. And for the parent ID, I'm going to put in number 1 because we're going to be attaching them to layer number 1. And I'm going to click apply. And then let's go ahead and select those same layers. Let's go to scale. And for parent type, I'm going to put it on XY as well. And I'm going to click on apply. So right now, if we click on our faux camera and we move things around, everything's moving just as they would if they were normally parented. So nothing too exciting yet, but in order for parallax to work, we need the objects in the back to move a smaller distance than the objects in the front. And then that's the same thing with scaling. As we scale up and down, the objects closer to the camera are going to scale more than the objects further away. So let's take a look at how we're going to make that happen. So I'm going to select all of our layers again. And I'm going to come over here to influence, and we're going to change the influence of these. Now, let's take a look. It does matter when I click on them, the order. So this first one that I click on would be the minimum influence, and then the last one would be the maximum. So I'm going to actually select the bushes first, hold down Shift, and then click on ground, because I want the ground to have the maximum influence. So for this, I'm going to put on sequential position. So it's going to break up our values evenly between all these different layers. So my minimum influence, the ones in the back, so our bushes, I want it to only move 5% of its parent, of the faux camera here. And the maximum influence, the ones that are closest to the camera, I'm going to put this on 100%. Okay, so that it moves the same amount as the camera. And let's go ahead and click on apply. And we can see up here that the influence for the bushes is 5%. If we move up to the next layer, to the trees, it's at 17%. And as we move up, we can see that it increments up until it gets to 100. So let's go ahead and select our layers again, because we need to also apply this influence difference to scale. So I'm going to put on sequential scale. Now, one thing that I've found with creating this faux 3D effect is that I don't want the same range of influence on the scale. Okay, it's a little bit too much. So I'm going to set the minimum to something like 70%. Okay, and our maximum will be at 100. And I'm going to click on apply. And so now our influence for the scale starts at 70% and then increments all the way up to 100%. So now if we move our camera here, so let me put on the position and we move this, we can see that we are now getting a parallax effect going on. So we can animate the position and the scale. So I'm going to go ahead and set keyframes for both of those. And I'm going to move this out to the 3-second mark. And let's start with something kind of zoomed in. Okay, and let's go ahead and move in a little bit more. And I'm going to move the camera off to the side here. Now, some of my layers, let's see, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. So we zoom in with the scale. And would have been nice if I would have made the layers a little bit bigger, but so I'm going to go super extreme here so that we can see this. And let's just go ahead and do a little RAM preview. Okay, and obviously my layers, like I said, could be a little bit bigger, so kind of showing the edge of them here. Okay, and so that's how we can perform a faux 3D parallax. Works out really nice. All of our layers are still two-dimensional, so we don't get it into any of the problems that we might run into with turning them into 3D and turning on collapse transformations. And it's really flexible. I've been using this technique a lot, especially with some of the character work that I've been doing. Keep everything 2D and then simplify your projects just a bit.